and this is a COVID file. Called such because I have COVID, I'm quarantining, so I might as well do something with my time. And my voice is not what I would wish it to be, because this version of COVID kind of wrecked my voice with heavy cold-like symptoms. So I figure I'm healthy enough to do this, but not to do full videos using the full range of my voice, so hopefully you can put up with me just talking for a little bit. This particular COVID file is about what's in this box. Now, this box is originally from RPG Crate, which was a subscription box service that I had for quite a while. But eventually at 35 bucks a pop, these got to be a bit too expensive for my blood. Especially what was coming in were things that I didn't really have a use for. Mostly little modules, some miniatures, some nice stuff, but often stuff that I didn't go looking for and found myself with relatively little use for. So it was some good stuff, don't get me wrong. I thought overall value was pretty good, but I just didn't need it. The matter more so than what was originally in the box, though, is what I've put in the box since. Because this box contains a handful of GURPS characters. Now, what I would have said in some of these are all my characters, but in fact, not a single one of them is mine. Here's the sad truth. I love the GURPS game system. I think it's one of the finest simulation systems that's ever been made. Hands down. I think they work really, really hard to come up with a system that gives you a sense of proportion in the amount of work that it takes to get good at something. Objectively, I think it's a pretty fine system to represent reality. Is it 100% accurate? Well, no, but you can't... God doesn't play dice, and dice rarely work perfectly well for simulating the realities we're used to. GURPS is no different. So yes, in GURPS you can figure out how many dice you would roll for the force of an atomic bomb. It's got a little exponent next to it, so it's a lot of dice. But, quite honestly, I think it's one of the finest systems that exists. If you want to represent and replicate anything in a game, that's the #1 system that I would point somebody to and say, if you want it accurate, if you want it to make sense, GURPS is the way to go. As a point-buy system, everything is relative. And yeah, even within the same system, sometimes things can be very relative. So it's going to vary on what kind of story you want to tell and which rules within GURPS you want to use. Sure. But the fact is, you can do just about anything with it. There's really no role-playing experience that I can think of that you can't play with GURPS. It's not even that it's very complicated. One of the big hallmarks against it is it's a big, scary system that's very complicated. And it's really not. If you understand the core of the system, to see if anything happens, you roll 3 6-sided dice and see if you get underneath the total that you're looking for. That's it. It's not that hard. The Game Master does most of the work, and most of that work is it a +2 or a +3 or a -2 or -3 or something like that? I mean, it's really very basic. Getting to the point where it becomes very basic takes a little work, but it's worth it in the end. And you can see satisfying growth of your characters in a way that's not contrived and artificial, like a class system where, boom, you go up a level, and all of a sudden now you've got all these different abilities and your numbers go up and stuff. GURPS is more diligent, more accurate to life. If you exercise a skill, you improve the quality of that skill for you, how often you can rely on it, being able to do more and more difficult things with it. Sure. The sad truth is, I've only ever played GURPS once. Ever. In my life. And that was at a convention. Gen Con. I believe it was 1998 or 1997. I got in a GURPS game. It was called, if I remember right, Spaceship X or Space Arc X. The idea was that humanity was fleeing from Earth, so they formed these huge spaceships and shot significant portions of the population across space. And they went A, B, C, D, D. We were on X. We were not great. Our characters were frightfully subpar. And we woke up to a ship full of mostly dead people because everybody had been in suspended animation, cryo storage, and the systems had all gone bonkers, and we found out that most of the people on board were already dead. So we got revived to deal with the situation that, well, some of the odd insects and things that had gotten onto the ship had mutated and evolved, and eventually now there were flying fly people that we might have to deal with and things like that. One of the worst role-playing experiences of my life. I thought I looked at the character and appreciated that he was pretty pathetic, till I realized too late that my character only had one arm. Kind of a big deal. Kind of something I should have known about. So when we took on a rather aggressive stance against these fly people, and my character ended up getting killed because one spat corrosive goop at him, and he was not in any position to defend himself, he died. And it was a total party kill. That's how games worked sometimes back then. We really weren't in a position to fight, but we insisted that we fight, and the storyteller killed us off. The game master just... Alright, that's how it's going to be. And our characters all died. We never got to find out how that ended. So, ultimately, my only experience as a player with GURPS was a crushing failure. Sad but true. But I still hold it up because I love the conceits, I love the concepts of the game, and the mechanics, I think, make a lot of sense and are very strong. Especially the 3rd edition, actually, which I preferred a little bit over the 4th edition. I thought the 3rd edition really had some things that made more sense to me. But I understand streamlining brought on some of the changes the 4th edition did, which, it's fine. But all the characters that you'll find in those boxes were from the 3 games of GURPS that I've tried to run over the years. Only 3. There's a reason for that. Number 1, GURPS requires an incredible amount of work by a game master. You really have to take in your world and portray that for the players, but it takes a lot of work to get it to the point that a lot of game systems like Dungeons & Dragons I barely need to prepare for. The players will make their characters. I know the systems. I know what makes a tough character tough. I know how to make a challenge for the players. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. In GURPS, I have to help the players to make the characters because if they're going to play around in my world, I have to tell them the boundaries on how to make characters. Because the character generation stuff in the books is so broad, you can make anything from a battlesuit wearing space marine to a caveman to a powerful wizard. You have to trim and prune what the players have available to fit your world concept. That's without even getting into your world itself. So it's a bit more involved. Doesn't mean it's not worth the effort. It just takes a bit more. And I've run 3 campaigns. Okay. The first campaign that I ran was a superhero game. This almost broke me. Because I said, okay, superheroes, you can use stuff from any of these books. And I took all of my GURPS books and I plopped them down. And the players were pretty excited. And I had 2 core books and people were just going through and superheroes. I think they were, well, I can actually look. I think there were 500-point characters and everybody took their own style of characters with that. One of the characters, I still remember her name, Paige Vander. She was a college student who got the ability to turn into a porcupine woman with the ability to defensively have quills, and she could fire those quills. And I kept most of the characters from that superhero campaign, too. So this was Paige. It's nice art. But yeah, she could shoot quills, and she had solid defense. We had... What was was his name? We had the self-insert. My musician friend created a character who was basically just a itinerant wanderer musician who himself seemed to have no powers, but he instead had incredible levels of luck. To the point that he never wanted for anything. He was dead broke, couldn't hold down a job to save his life, but if he was hungry, he'd just kind of look around and he'd find a $10 bill to go to a fast food place and get food. If there was some big disaster, like he was in a plane that crashed, the plane crashes into the ground, bodies strewn everywhere, there's a flushing sound, he opens the door of the bathroom, completely fine. That's the level of luck that he purchased. All those points. And he was a decent musician himself. He had a nice little bit of art for it and everything. The character's name was Francis Lloyd Anderson. Interesting character. Never a threat to... And a character like that is so hard to game plan around and to make a challenge for, because if anything sets him back, he's like, but I'm lucky. That shouldn't set me back. Hard to argue around that. I learned a lot through this game. There was some painful stuff. Then there was... Oh, yeah. Then we had the Golem Man. He could basically turn to any substance and turn it into an animate humanoid shape to do his bidding. That took a long time to figure out how those numbers would work, but we did it. GURPS is amazing. All the different things that you can do with that system, oh, just incredible. Even the most esoteric things are possible if you kind of open your mind to how it all would eventually work out. And he was satisfied and I was satisfied by the time we were done, even though it took us about 2 hours just to negotiate around his powers. And then we had the experiment. Nicknamed Zipper. He was a lab experiment, about 3 feet tall, with an altered time rate. He could fly all over the place, and he had claws, and he was just a nasty little man-child. That's what he came up with. He was an interesting enough character. And you know, I cannot remember the campaign anymore. I can't remember the challenge of these group. These people were so disparate. You only had a couple of people who were typical superheroes who could be challenged in superhero ways. The power levels, the seeming power level disparity was all over the map. So yeah, it was really... It ended up being too impossible to run. I think we had 3 sessions total. It wasn't good. It wasn't the game I was really all that proud of in the end. But it was something that we tried. And, you know, it died. Then I had this idea for a fun little post-apocalyptic fantasy game where, you know, it was more like a Fallout meets D&D. So there were all these relics of the past, and your characters, some of them could use technomancy, some of them could use actual magic or psychic abilities. It had potential, but the group broke up before that one could go anywhere, which was unfortunate because they all made characters, and they were pretty solid characters. We had a character who was a werewolf. We had a character who was basically a gargoyle with necromantic abilities. It was a good solid range of fantasy stuff. We had one person who dabbled in the magic system, so... But it broke up. The game never went anywhere. Again, sad failure of one of my GURPS games. And the one that I'm the most broken up about, and this comes to almost confession levels here, I ran a group. This was the last game of my ladies group, which consisted of my wife and most of the significant others and wives of my friends. They had fun chemistry together. They enjoyed playing together. They weren't the most serious group. And sometimes that worked against us, but sometimes it just made the nights so much fun. They were irreverent. They did some things that, you know, if inwardly my jaw would drop, even though I would try to keep up a poker face. I think they enjoyed just shocking me sometimes. But I did a GURPS game that was kind of going to be them traveling to a variety of different genres and universes and being able to keep some of the skills that they learn from each one and inhabiting new avatars that unlocked different abilities for each of the worlds, but them still having this bank of skills that they were developing along the way so that, you know, they could do things like, if they were in the Star Wars universe, they might be able to cast a spell because, well, the Force exists. Why not magic? So they might be able to do some low-level magics that would work in the Star Wars universe. They would be seen as a Force user of some sort, but, you know, could be interesting. And that broke down. The group basically dissolved. A lot of it was external influences, but I was not on my game, and that one was really unfortunate. It was something that I had allowed my ego to get to be too much, and I created my self-insert to be a GM NPC, the worst kind of GM PC. Super powerful and one who will be telling the characters what to do. No. No, bad. It was bad. And those are the 3 GURPS games that I ran. Now, moving forward, I have every bit of hope that the group that I have now can get back into GURPS, because they've already redeemed Paranoia to me to some extent. I've been able to run a very successful Paranoia game that the group loved. And we'll play that again. But I'm hoping they can redeem GURPS for me too, because I really do think that's a fine game system. And I really do want to run a game of GURPS at some point. I have a lot of GURPS books, and I've loved to read it. I've loved to fantasize about what that game is going to be like when it wins. And I haven't ever gotten to that point. And it's something I'm very hungry for. Will I ever get to that point? I don't know. But do I want to? Yeah, absolutely. I think the game deserves it. Deserves to have at least a good game from me. I know there are people out there who've played and run GURPS for a fairly long time, successfully. And honestly, the GURPS book was one of my first role-playing game books. The first one I ever bought for myself. And I've never been able to use it right. So, crossing fingers, going forward into 2022, some point I'm going to try to run GURPS again. And I'm hoping that I can succeed and tell you all about this game that I've got in mind. So, thank you one and all. This stupid COVID is wiping me out right now, so I can't really continue the story any further. But that's my synopsis on GURPS. A game with so much potential, but I've just been snake-bitten every time I've tried to run it. Crossing my fingers I can do this one well and do it justice someday. Thanks one and all. Until that next time when I crawl in front of the internet to make a video for you, I'm Rob, and this has been another COVID file. Until that next time, farewell.